Hi, Hal. This is Hal Kempfer. He is a counter-terrorism expert and homeland security expert. He's been grateful to sit here and talk with me about some news regarding COVID and the tennis world. There's some news that broke out the last few days about the USTA. They're looking into a lot of options about the US Open, which is played in the fall. And with everything going on in New York, they have to consider maybe relocating it and move to another venue. And one venue they're looking into is Indian Wells around Thanksgiving time in November. So Hal's been kind enough to join me and talk about that, as well as not just tennis but sports. So Hal, I'll just start with this question. We're talking about the fall. That's about the end of August, early September is when the US Open happens. With everything going on in New York with the COVID virus, do you think that's a possibility? And if so, is it, to me, it seems like it'd be a long shot from everything we're hearing about New York.
Well, what I think is that obviously November in New York is it's a tough month for weather. Just because,
I mean the original date, which would be in the fall of
right,
late August, September.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but I should say that doing this in November in Indian Wells from a weather perspective is fine. They certainly have the facilities, they have the resources to do that. Now, well, what about the COVID virus? Well, we shouldn't have any expectation that there will be a vaccine out by that time. There are some promising things in that there are some treatments, for example, which may reduce some mortality rate. That will eventually enter into a political decision on a lot of things, which is if the mortality rate gets down to a certain level, you may see that a lot of things suddenly get opened up. The problem is if you go to an event, you still risk contracting or being infected with COVID-19. It's, generally speaking, and it's not just this event, but certainly all professional sports are looking at, can we open up? Well, there's certain things that have to happen. Number one is people have to feel safe that it's okay to go to those places. There's a lot of steps that have to happen before they'll feel safe. For example, if you go there, you want to make sure you're not going to sit down next to somebody who's infected with COVID-19. That would be a big concern because you feel infected. You don't want to encounter people that are infected with COVID-19. So how do you deal with that? Well, one of the things that it's in the news a lot is this concept of universal testing. So for example, if you go to one of these big events, you may have to be tested negative for COVID-19. You may have to show up and have a proof of testing. It could be entered into a database or something where they send you a barcode on your phone, and just like going to an airport where you put it there, you go in with a barcode that says, I have been tested in the last 24 hours for COVID-19. That would say that even if you are infected, you're probably not contagious and shedding virus. All right. So you could come in and see the event. Now, an event that goes over a series of days, you have to timeline that. You come in negative, but within that time period, you'd probably have to get retested. So if you have an event that goes on for a long period of time, it may be, okay, you're good for today, but tomorrow you got to get retested again or something like that. That would build a degree of assuredness within the public that's there that they're probably not going to get it. Another thing you could do, of course, is they can all wear masks. Masks work. Masks block the spray from the nose and the mouth, and they work. I'm sure you've seen these things on the news where they show someone wearing a mask and they cough and they use a special lighting effect to show what looks like this plume of smoke coming out from around their face. That's if you cough. So with the mask, you also want to do a syndromic surveillance, which is I want to check to make sure that people are showing up, aren't coughing, they're not feverish, they're asymptomatic. It's not that someone can be asymptomatic and contagious, but if they're symptomatic, in other words, they're coughing and they're sweating, they're a lot more contagious because of virtue of what they're doing than someone who's asymptomatic. So if I can eliminate all the symptomatic people from coming in, and that's a fairly simple thing. I mean, when you go to the airport, they'll do the thing where they put the thermometer to your forehead to check if you got a fever.
Mm-hmm.
That's been around for a long time. I do a lot of traveling in Africa, and particularly in West Africa. Those are the standard Ebola protocols. When you go to an airport, they check to see if you got a fever.
Mm-hmm.
That works. There are more advanced technology, more advanced sensors. You can mount them. You can mount them on drones if you want, and they can actually look at a crowd and pick out people who are feverish, and then through a series of algorithms figure out, are they feverish from an illness or are they feverish from activity, which is a sporting event. That's good to know.
Right.
Also, they can look at their body language to see if they're coughing.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, if you mount them on drones, they can actually go through and identify if people are maintaining social distancing, and the drone could literally fly up to them and say, "Hey, move apart. You're getting too close." I mean, it starts to sound a little bit like Terminator or something, but it is there's technology out there that can be used to mitigate a lot of these things. So, whereas if the technology was not there, is it too soon to do it in November?
Mm-hmm.
Probably. All right. Because the COVID is still out, the COVID-19, the virus is still out there. It's still contagious. Are there things we could do? Physical prophylaxis type things, such as wearing masks, maintaining social distancing, doing things along those lines? Yes. Is there technology we can employ? Yes. And I would put testing in the technology bucket and say, there is really good testing out there. Some of the tests I've seen, which are quick turnaround tests for PCR, they're within minutes. I mean, literally, you get the swab, and which is not a pleasant test. Putting that swab in your nose or in the back of your throat is a very unpleasant test.
Right.
But you get that test, you put it in there, literally within minutes. I would say, to be on the safe side, because of how the machines work, you probably want to tell people you need to show up 2 or 3 hours in advance, and they go into a testing center and get tested before they go in. But with 99.6% accuracy, that's about as accurate as you get. And that would tell you that you're doing pretty good. And then if you put masks on and everything else, maintain social distancing, I think it's possible. The other thing, though, I want to bring out is disinfection, indoor and outdoor.
Okay.
And there are ways to do that. There's some really interesting new substances. There are antimicrobial things that can be applied to surfaces like chairs. They can be applied to stands. They can be applied to tables. They can be applied to doorknobs, and they're persistent, which means, okay, let's say I'm infected with COVID-19. Oh man, I do this, and then I turn a doorknob. What did I just do?
Yikes,
I infected the doorknob.
Yeah.
I have this antimicrobial on it. I do this, I touch the doorknob. On the doorknob is a substance that will actually annihilate the virus cell. Okay. That's actually an EPA term, is annihilate. First time I saw that, I go, really? EPA uses the term annihilate? But what it does is, not to get too scientific, but it's an exchange of positive, negative polarities within the cells, and there's it's almost like a kinetic kill, as we used to say, but it's a physical kill of the cell, and it can be used for bacteria cells. They've been using this for years in gyms to stop staph infections, but it also works on viruses as well. And there's something just out I'm very excited about. It's an application where they form it to a surface of a table or to a doorknob or whatever, and it's good for about a week to 2 weeks. Sometimes they say 30 days.
Wow,
so
really?
Theoretically, at a sports venue, you could apply this to tables, your armrests on your seats, where anything you would touch. You could apply this for a week or 2 weeks, and it would be an active antiviral that would destroy virus cells that it comes in contact with.
What's that called?
That opens up a whole opportunity for public venue things that weren't there before.
With that thing, what is that called? The application that's good for a week to 30 days. Is there a name for it?
I'm not making a. Yeah, I Actually, I have to pull it up. I have to look at the
No,
name.
that's fine. That's
It
fine.
came out with a brand name. I was looking at it,
Okay.
and they just put out a brand name on that. But the one that you apply perhaps daily or every few hours,
Hmm.
that's called monofoil. All right.
Okay.
And that's actually being used in a lot of different places already.
Okay.
This new one that just came out, I got to actually pull up and look at the brand name they came out with.
That's fine.
I was briefed on this a few weeks ago, and then literally 2 days ago, they sent out a flyer, which I didn't think it was going to be developed that fast. But then again, the market has such demand right now that things that used to take months
Right.
are suddenly being compressed because there's a huge demand to get this stuff out there and into use.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's great that they're ramping up. Let me take a look here really quick. I had a question here for you to follow up. So a lot of the applications at the sporting events, or hospital to treat staph infections, that's kind of what they would do at sporting events. I know you started talking about it, but can you kind of go into details? What would be the difference of disinfecting an indoor arena versus an outdoor arena?
it's interesting. People think of disinfecting out. They go, how would you disinfect an outdoor arena?
Right.
One of the things which is pretty exciting, you've probably seen these agricultural drones.
Mm-hmm.
We've all seen crop dusters where they fly over low the ground and drop stuff. Well, the same thing is being done with drones. They have the agricultural drones where they basically drop pesticide or herbicide or whatever it is they want to drop, for agricultural purposes.
Mm-hmm.
That same concept of a drone doing that can also be used for outdoor disinfection. You put a disinfecting agent into the containers and it flies over a space and basically drops disinfecting agent, which could be something rather benign that's used all the time, on outdoor chairs, tables, sidewalks, wherever it is outdoors. And you can cover a large amount of territory. So for example, let's say you had a tennis venue with a lot of seats and stuff like that, you could use the drone and fly over and disinfect all the seats. You could disinfect the courts. You could disinfect pretty much everything out there using drones. For things where there's going to be high contact, I would then say you might want to look at putting antimicrobials where people are going to, they're going to touch that, like their armrests with the chairs and stuff. So you might want to put an antimicrobial there to reinforce that. Could that be delivered via drone? Possibly. That's a discussion right now. It hasn't been done before because it never came up before, but it's a discussion, which is maybe we can apply those via drones. That's a possibility. So that's for outdoor stuff. So basically, anywhere people are going to be outdoors, you could do with using drones, or you can just go through doing spray. I've seen stuff where they do these big like spray fire hose type things where they just spray down area. That works fine too. Whichever way you can do outdoor, and then indoor, a variety of different things. But you can use spray stuff. Theoretically, you could use drones indoors. That's a big discussion for some of the really large indoor venues.
Right.
That's a possibility. One thing that's done quite a bit is using a fogging system with hydrogen peroxide.
Isn't that kind of like what they do for termites at your house?
It's the fact it looks almost the same. Yeah. Basically wear full PPE, the mask and everything. And basically they just fog an area with hydrogen peroxide fog, which kills everything. And then it's disinfected. So when you go to a sports venue, when you show up indoors or outdoors, wherever you sit, wherever you go, you're absolutely 100% sure it's been disinfected. And then hopefully with the persistent antimicrobials, the places that you're going to touch a lot, like your armrests or doorknobs or surfaces, those would be coated in the antimicrobials. So you have an active thing that's trying to do that. And then you do testing on top of that. You do a certain amount of social distancing. You do all these other things on top of it, and certainly with syndromic surveillance with sensors. At some point, it becomes very, very, very difficult to transmit a virus at this venue because of all these safeguards that are put in place that basically mitigate or prevent that from happening.
Now, if I'm a promoter and stuff, how difficult and also how expensive is it to implement all of that? And let's just start with an indoor venue like say Staples Center, which is about roughly 20,000. An indoor stadium, roughly 20,000. We'll start there.
You know, it depends on how much they want to invest. It's going to be a big investment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I won't kid anybody that it's gonna be hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars over a period of time, depending on how much, you know. There's the stuff you have to invest in technology up front,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like the sensor systems and things like that, or if you're going to get drones, how often are you going to get drones? Where are you going to get the drones from? Are you going to lease them, have a service come in? Are you going to buy them? There's a lot of determinations on that. And then, of course, the substances themselves, the materials, how often are you going to disinfect? How often do you have events going? So there's a lot of variation. So it's tough to say it's absolutely going to be this amount.
Right.
I would say for a large venue, if you're planning a season, you're looking at millions of dollars. I don't know about tens of millions. I wouldn't rule that out. Depends on how often. You know, Staples Center is an interesting venue,
right?
Because they transition. I'm sure you've seen that video where they would transition from a hockey game to a baseball game or back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is one of the most amazing choreographed dances I've ever seen. Tear everything down. And it's amazing to watch, but it just depends on how often they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And then of course, you know, once they transition over, they got to go right back in and disinfect everything again. So, you know, there's a lot of variables on that. I can't give you a hard fixed price, but I can tell you that whatever it is a heck of a lot less expensive than just staying closed. Right. And that's really the number to look at. And not the number. You probably should spend less amount of time focused on, well, it's going to cost money out of pocket, and looking at how much is it costing us not to be open? How much is it costing us not to be in business? That's what they really need to be looking at.
Right. But I mean, it's very intricate what you've described. There's a lot of things and a real major change in the culture, but I mean, obviously it'd be worth it. I think we're all going a little stir crazy without any sports or live entertainment right now. At least I am. Now, getting back to the drones and spraying the disinfectant, how long of a process does that take? Is it just something you do daily if you needed to? For
daily, you know, a few hours. It's like any other cleaning thing. Obviously, you got to come in and clean. You know, spraying disinfectant is not going to take gum off the sidewalk, so to speak. So you got to do the standard cleaning stuff. But then this is just an additional step you go through where you have to go through and disinfect. It's not a really long process. I mean, it can be done on a daily basis, but it has to be done. Some of the disinfectants, you know, you can spray it, and within an hour, a couple hours, or whatever, you're fine. You know,
now
in summertime, or you know, if you spray something, it'll evaporate so quickly. You know, there's some questions as to whether you even need to. Some sports venues outdoors in the summertime, it may honestly transmission may not, from a surface thing, may not be, depending on where the surface is, may not be a big deal because it depends on the temperature of whatever it is. You know, I tell you, in the Middle East, when I was deployed over there and we were there in the summer, and we were looking at the possibility of terrorists or some other bad actor using chemical or biological weapons, there was a number of things we looked at. We said the ground temperature is so hot that if it touches the ground, by the time we got there, there would be nothing left. There would be no threat that was there because, frankly, between the winds and the sun, it had pretty much burned everything off.
So we're talking about big investments about implementing this infrastructure. How long would it take to implement it for like a Staples Center or say the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, to implement everything that you said, the sensors, the drones, the disinfectants?
Weeks, not months.
Weeks, not months?
Yeah, it depends on how extensive it is, but some of the sensor systems, depending on availability of sensors at any given time, could take a little bit longer. But you know, I know that, for example, with tests, the test kits are out there. In fact, I've been scratching my head on that as to why there's so much news about you can't get test kits, you can't get masks. I know behind on the other side, there's masks and test kits available, high end test kits. You know, made in the USA, with the emergency use authorization from FDA. So that stuff is fairly readily available. That's like a few weeks. To build a sensor system or to have one brought in, that would be maybe weeks, several weeks to put something like that in. Same thing with drones. And it depends on the number of drones they want and the configurations. And, some of these things you get mission creep. It's like, we want a drone. Okay. And then you get into examining what they want to do. It's like, well, okay, you actually need 3 drones. Okay, we want 3 drones. Well, I'm not a math whiz, but if you get 3 drones versus 1 drone, that's 3 times as many drones. Okay. So, and then they'll say, well, we want to put a sensor system here fixed on a pole looking this way. All right. What about over here? Oh, yeah, well, let's put one over there too. Okay. And then, let's put one over here too. Pretty soon, you got 3 times as many sensor systems. And that's where it takes a certain amount of lag time, because there'll be certain stuff in inventory for any firm at any given time. And then there's certain stuff they actually have to put into the production cycle to get out there. But what I would say is this, waiting is not a good idea. The thing with COVID-19, if we're looking at late summer or fall, COVID-19 is going to be around. One thing we do know now is that this thing is mutating at a fairly rapid level. The COVID-19 virus that we're dealing with today is actually much more contagious, virulent, if you will, than the COVID-19 that we were dealing with, say, back in December. That's how fast this thing is mutated. And the full expectation is that we're going to get hit with a second wave in the fall. And that will probably be another mutated virus. All right. It may be more contagious than the one we're dealing with now. We don't know. But everything I just talked about still applies. All the sensors, all the technology, all the disinfection, it still applies regardless. So if the idea is to wait till midsummer to make a decision for something you're planning on doing late summer or fall, you're really waiting too late. You need to get in line and order that stuff now to make sure that everything's up and ready to go, tested, and your concept of operations works well. It works, at every given facility.
Yeah, as we can tell during this pandemic, resources disappear quickly and rapidly. So you're absolutely right. It sounds like, you just got. So really quickly, we were talking about testing for an event. So the US Open is 2 weeks. So would you have to submit to a test every single day you go into the US Open, or how often would you have to test if you go the full tournament?
That's a good question. That's an excellent question, by the way. First off, if you go to the US Open, if I go to the US Open and I'm there the first day, I'd like to make sure that everyone there has been tested. All right.
Right.
That's just kind of how I feel. Okay. Now, the question then is, all right, what's your chances of being infected? And then, like, you walk out of the test and somehow you're magically infected with it again. Just worst luck in the world. It's like, hey, you're negative. Great. You walk out and you just happen to stand next to somebody who's infected and they pass it on to you or something. That's possible. It's unlikely it would happen that fast, but it's statistically unlikely, but it's possible something like that could happen. So then you're dealing with the incubation period. Now I'm infected. How long till I'm shedding virus? And that's where, generally speaking, we're talking about 2 to 3 days. We think. I wish I could give you a hard answer on that, but we think. So probably every couple of days, you'd probably need to be tested.
Right.
It'd be very inconvenient to be tested every couple of days with that swab all the way up your nose.
Right.
That's why I'm somewhat optimistic about the saliva test. Theoretically, the saliva test should carry enough of the virus that they can test that. And recent tests of using saliva have been very productive. I should say they've come out very well. The early ones, they just weren't getting the accuracy they wanted. The more recent ones, it's still too early, but they're saying the accuracy has improved dramatically. If you can get a saliva test up to that 99.6 or 99 point something % accuracy level, spitting is it's not exactly a pleasant thing to watch happen, but but let's just say, compared to the inconvenience of having a swab jammed up your nose, saliva test is nothing to spit at. Okay, it's just a lot easier. And
Right.
so someone goes in there, they spit in the test, and they get a quick turnaround and says you're COVID negative. Doing that every other day, that's not that inconvenient at all.
Yeah. It
And
seems like it
go
seems
ahead.
like this spit test would accelerate that timetable when we can get back to sports because, it's like you were saying, I think sticking the swab up your nose, like if you're going to the US Open, you probably have to, I mean, you probably just have to do it every day because they couldn't tell if they tested you and give you 1 or 2 day breaks.
I,
To
I
do that for 14 straight days would be kind of miserable, I would think.
you'd have to have a barcode probably on your phone or something, which would that would show your current in
Hmm.
terms of your testing cycle. Which that brings up another issue with smartphones.
Hmm.
Right now in California, the plan for contact tracing is they're going to hire an army of contact tracers. Now, traditionally, the way contact tracing's been done forever, and this literally goes back to the age of cholera. I mean, we're talking way, way back to when that was a major issue.
Hmm.
Contact tracing is kind of like medical detective work, which
Hmm.
is someone comes up positive and you say, okay, great. All right, it's not great that you get positive, but it's like,
Right.
all right, so where have you been?
Hmm.
When were you there?
Hmm.
Who did you come in contact with? Who do you remember seeing? How
Hmm.
long were, and then you go back and you find those people and you say, okay, there's a good chance you could have been exposed to this virus. You need to come in and get tested, or you need to self-isolate
Hmm.
for 14 days or something, whatever the rule is. That's
I see.
great.
Right.
That's the best of 1970s thinking. Some would say 1920s thinking.
Hmm.
Um, we all carry smartphones.
Right.
And with smartphones, um, unless you have a smartphone with no apps downloaded, and I have yet to meet anybody with a smartphone that has no apps downloaded, when you download an app, you opt in for something.
Hmm.
Most of those include a geo tracking thing where they can go through and see where you are.
Right.
The most famous one is if you have the app for say Lyft or Uber,
Hmm.
that tracks where you are because that's how the phone knows where you are to get the Uber to you to take you someplace. All right.
Yeah, I know Google Maps has it too, because every once in a while I'll get a message. They'll say, "Were you at this point?" Like, because I'll be at strip mall. They'll think it was one store, but I was actually the next store. So it's being done already.
It's being done already. And, I remember when I started using Google, you'd see a little pop up ad would come in saying, hey, you want a Big Mac special or something? And you go, huh? And then you'd look over, and there was a McDonald's right there. All right. And what that is it's a marketing thing. They're basically just tracking where you are and
Hmm.
where you're at. And some of the algorithms are pretty sophisticated. So, for example, if you went to McDonald's for lunch on Monday,
Hmm.
and you went to Burger King for lunch on Tuesday,
Hmm.
you might get an ad for a Whopper on Wednesday. All right.
Right.
And it's basically just saying, okay, this is what you did. This is your pattern. This is what we're seeing. So
Hmm.
we're going to target these ads to you because we know you like, certain types of fast food restaurants or something like that.
Hmm.
Well, that can also be used for contact tracing.
Hmm.
There's a variety of things out there. One of the most effective ones I've seen is where they collate, they collect. Well, they actually don't have to collect. They just collate that data
Hmm.
and then analyze it, put it through a series of algorithms. And so if you come up COVID-19 positive through your smartphone, it can immediately track back where you've been. Your phone
Hmm.
knows where you were. You may
Right.
forget, but your phone knows where you were. There's a record of where you were,
Yeah.
and they can go back weeks. In fact, in one case they say you can go back 4 months and
Hmm.
figure out where you've been. And then if you come in proximity with any other smartphone, it immediately knows.
Hmm.
So let's say you walk through a mall.
Hmm.
You're not going to remember everybody you walked by in the mall,
Right.
but your smartphone knows where you were,
Hmm.
and the other smartphones know where they were. So you walk through a mall, you're COVID-19 positive. All of a sudden, you walk by 100 people. All 100 people get a little text message that says, you came in contact with somebody who was COVID-19 positive. Please call this number to arrange a test. please self-isolate for 14 days or whatever the message is that they want to send them. Now, the question is that invasion of privacy? If it doesn't identify you by name, if it's just your phone was there, most experts I know who've looked at this, and and to include the United Kingdom's looked at this extensively, and they've said it's really not an invasion of privacy. It's an electronic footprint that says you were there, and it's sending you a message. It's not asking who you are. It's not identifying you by name. It's just giving you a warning, just like you would with contact tracing. Just give you a warning, saying you were in proximity to somewhere. That's pretty exciting technology. And I look at major sporting venues. You can imagine a major sporting venue, how many people, if you were positive, you could have come in contact with.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine doing that the old-fashioned way, where you contact everybody and say, hey, it just wouldn't work. But in a sporting venue, if you could do this automated way of letting everybody know that you came in contact with somebody, please go get tested. Okay, so they go get tested. You walk by 200 people today. They go out and get tested. 5 of those people came up positive. By the way, for all those 5 that came up positive, guess what we're going to do? We're going to check where they were. All right. And then pretty soon you get down to the numbers of all those who were actually infected, or at least most of those who were infected. About 95% of the population carries smartphones, or adult population does. So, so you can really winnow out those who were infected very quickly, which again reduces the chance of transmission, which increases the amount of public confidence. If you go to these events, it's going to be safe. That's the whole idea.
Just to backtrack on this a little bit, have they been using people's cell phones to track where they've been after they've tested positive? I'm not quite sure if I've read about how extensively they've been using that. I was wondering if you knew.
The United Kingdom's been, it's been used in a variety of places. Singapore has an app that you download. And if you download the app, it actively tracks you from the app. Okay. All right. Israel had an app you download, and you download the app, and it tracks you and anybody else has the app. With the Israeli example specifically, they were only getting about 20% participation of the population. Okay. With the one I just talked about, where you take the data that's already from apps you already have on your phone, they're getting over 90% penetration across the population base. So that's a much better sample, if you will. It's not a sample. I mean, it's a much better coverage across the board. Now, there's one that came out, which is kind of interesting, is the Bluetooth. Right. Which a lot of people were excited because they said, well, if your Bluetooth is there, if you got your Bluetooth turned on, it will talk to any other Bluetooth. And so if you're COVID-19 positive, that just gets entered into your phone, and your Bluetooth will warn anybody else you come in contact with that you're COVID-19 positive, and you'll get a little warning thing that says, warning, you're coming in contact with someone's COVID-19 positive. All right. They said, that's great. That gives you instantaneous warning. It sounded great until you started kind of taking it apart, and you look at it and go, so if you're COVID-19 positive, why are you going out in public and meeting people? I mean, aren't you supposed to be isolated if you're COVID-19 positive? And so there was a bit of an assumption piece right off front. And then the other part is, and if you know you're COVID-19 positive and you're still going out in public and meeting people, that says to me you might be inclined to turn off your Bluetooth as well, which sort of defeats the whole thing. There was a series of assumptions, which this doesn't really quite seem to pan out. And then from a public health perspective, it gives them nothing. They don't know. Whereas if you do the contact tracing through other means, they get a report back. They can actually track people out there, or they can contact people to do follow-up. They can do a lot of things to say, hey, did you actually get tested? Did you get your text? Did you see this? There's a lot of things they can do, whereas the Bluetooth thing does absolutely nothing for them. And the separate app thing, just a lot of people turn off their apps. They just, if that's an app, and for example, with the Israeli app, it was endorsed by the Israeli government. There was a concern, not just Israel, but other countries, that app may do more than just track them for,
Right.
for coronavirus. And that was enough to dissuade people, big brother's watching me, whoop,
Yep.
I'm going to turn the app off or disable it in some other way, or just delete it. And so that was a problem they had. The other one, it's commercial stuff. It's you've already opted in on this stuff, so there's no expectation of privacy on your phone. Who you are specifically, there's an expectation of privacy, and as long as it doesn't violate privacy rights or HIPAA for public health, for patient privacy, there really isn't a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just public confidence. Maybe some people get a little paranoid about it.
Oh,
But
a lot of paranoid. Yeah, you
yeah,
have to deal with that. And by the way, the other thing I would say for major sports venues is they need to educate the public. I still see this. We have. I mean, how many gazillion times have you been told wear a mask?
oh, a lot.
Yeah. How many times have you had it explained to you how to wear the mask, why the mask works in certain circumstances? Not that many times, comparatively speaking. Washing hands. Got to wash your hands. Most people, even now, still don't know how to wash their hands. They'll go in there and do this stuff real quick, and okay, good. And most of the virus, if it was on their hands, is still on their hands. So, the whole thing about, sing happy birthday to yourself twice or 20 seconds of washing. People generally are not trained extensively on how to wash their hands, why they wear the mask. For example, I was in a Home Depot and all the employees are required, everybody's wearing a mask. The employees wear masks. Well, it's kind of warm and stuffy in the Home Depot. So what they've done is they pulled the mask down below their mouth. They've got the mask, but if the mask is sitting on their chin, I'm not quite sure what it's doing, and maybe in their minds, I could tell in their minds, they're probably thinking the mask is to protect me from everybody else's stuff, but I'm okay because they're all wearing masks. No, actually the mask is to protect the customers because you could be, the employee could be COVID and asymptomatic, or positive and asymptomatic. And so if you pull the mask down, having a mask down around your chin or around your neck doesn't do any good. It's going to be covering up your nose and your mouth. And that's a training issue. And if it's a store, a major chain, and they're not training their personnel who are required as part of their work to wear a mask on how to wear a mask and why they're wearing a mask, that gives you a sense that the general public doesn't really know for the most part either. And I see strange things. I see people not wearing masks when clearly they should be wearing masks. And then I'll see people wearing masks when there's absolutely no reason why they should wear masks. They're literally in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody around them, at least within, say, 50 yards of any direction or whatever. Walking the sidewalk, they're wearing a mask. And in that specific instance, unless they just don't like the inconvenience of pulling their mask off, there's no reason to wear a mask.
Right.
I see people running and they're wearing a mask and they're running in the street. They're not close to anybody. They're really, there's no reason to be wearing a mask. And frankly, wearing a mask is very unpleasant if you're out for a long run or something. So, but yeah, I think public education is part of that. We have to train people if people know what to do and why they're doing it, that also is a mitigation tool to prevent spread of the virus.
Right. Well, Hal, thank you very much for joining me today and help me explain all this, especially when it comes to sports. Is there anything that we missed that you think we need to address?
I just think we need to start doing things now. We need to start making decisions, and it's going to, building all the preventive measures and mitigation measures necessary to put things back in operation, like major sporting events. That's not going to, sitting around and waiting for things to resolve themselves isn't going to work. We know that there probably won't be a vaccine out until, at least for wide scale use, until probably sometime next year. sitting around for 8 months or a year, remaining closed or non-operational, incurs a tremendous price. You know, particularly if it's a venue or a city that's reliant on tourist dollars or visitor dollars to basically pay for a lot of the economy. There's a huge price we pay as a society by not doing things that generate economic value in society. And so we're going to have to kind of weigh that. I'm not saying do not recklessly reopen, which I've seen in places where they just reopen and it looks rather ill-considered, and you know what's going to happen next. In fact, it's going to happen, which is spikes in infection rates. But the other side is we've got to make the investment in operating in this new normal, and it's not free. You know, it's just, well, we'll do a little social distancing. Well, in some cases, that's going to be very, very difficult to pull off. And it's not comprehensive. You know, we got to do all those things. Yeah, it's a greater cost, but it's at the cost of doing nothing.
Yeah, so doing nothing is an even greater cost.
Yeah.
So, Hal, thank you so much. This has been really informative, real educational, and you know, hopefully we'll see each other at a tennis match or a ball game or something soon. Need to get out there and need to watch something.
Okay, Lee, that sounds good. All right.
Sounds great. Thanks, Hal. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.